You're looking at your hand right now, the slender fingers and the delicate skin. It's a design calibrated for fine tools and social gestures, but it hides a biological secret about who you actually used to be. Somewhere deep in your genetic code, there is a blueprint for a body that was never meant to be this fragile. A blueprint belonging to a cousin we've spent a century calling a brute. You've seen the museum displays, the slumped shoulders and heavy brows. Science now tells a very different story. It's a story of a biological machine that was, in many ways, more sophisticated than the one you're currently inhabiting. This wasn't an evolutionary failure, it was a high-performance adaptation. Welcome to Wild Mind Facts. Today, we are peeling back the layers of the caveman myth to understand the deep, hidden logic of the Neanderthal legacy. This wasn't just a survival strategy, it was a physiological calculation. Every gram of muscle was a choice made by evolution to thrive in a landscape where a mistake meant a cold, lonely death. Take their faces, for example. We used to think their massive noses were just a way to warm the freezing air of the Eurasian tundra, but recent simulations suggest a much more complex calculation. Those large nasal passages were high-volume oxygen intakes, fuel injectors for a muscular frame that required 4,000 calories a day. They were built like tanks, shorter and broader than us to conserve heat, but with a lung capacity that would make an Olympic athlete look like a pack smoker. Then there is the matter of the skull. If you held a Neanderthal brain in your hands, you'd notice it was significantly larger than yours, averaging around 1,600 cubic centimeters. However, the architecture was fundamentally different. While modern human brains are globular, Neanderthal brains were elongated, prioritizing the occipital lobes at the back of the head. Think of it as a specialized computer. Where we have a general-purpose processor for social networking, they had a high-end graphics card dedicated to tracking a mammoth through a blizzard. This suggests a hyper-specialized focus on visual and spatial processing. They weren't just seeing the world, they were mapping it with a resolution we can barely even imagine. But this specialized design came with a trade-off. Their cerebellums were smaller, the area we use for fine motor skills and the complex social processing that defines the modern human experience. For decades, the consensus was that Neanderthals communicated in grunts, lacking the hardware for true language. We assumed they were trapped in a world of silence and instinct. That consensus shattered when geneticists mapped the Neanderthal genome. They found the FOXP2 gene, the exact same linguistic template that allows you to understand these words right now. Their hyoid bones were actually virtually identical to ours. They didn't just grunt. They likely debated and planned in a language we will never hear. It suggests a social complexity that rivals our own. Language isn't just about talk. It's about the transmission of complex ideas across generations. We are beginning to see them not as a failed experiment, but as a parallel version of the very human story, a species that mastered the world through sensory precision. But if they were so physically superior and cognitively advanced, why did their entire lineage vanish while ours inherited the Earth? To find that answer, we have to look past their bodies and into the blueprints they left behind. Their minds were capable of more than just survival. They were the world's first true engineers, possessing a complex, abstract foresight that allowed them to visualize a finished tool inside a raw, unworked stone, just waiting to be born. That massive brain wasn't just a biological trophy, it was a high-functioning processor for physical engineering. We see this in a substance that shouldn't have existed then. In European forests, Neanderthals performed the world's first industrial chemical synthesis. They weren't just picking up resin, they were manufacturing birch tar. To create this adhesive, you must subject birch bark to dry distillation. This requires heating the material in a completely oxygen-free environment. If a single puff of air enters the chamber, the bark just turns to ash. If the temperature drops, the chemical bond never forms. This implies a level of calibration that challenges our definition of primitive. They were controlling variables like oxygen flow and thermal consistency. This tar wasn't a luxury, it was a structural necessity. It allowed them to haft stone points, creating composite weapons far more lethal than sharpened sticks. Think about the cognitive load. You have to gather bark, build a kiln, monitor the heat, and wait for the chemical transformation. This is abstract foresight. It's the ability to hold a non-existent result in your mind while performing counterintuitive steps. We see this same mental architecture in stone. The Levallois technique is a masterclass in predictive geometry. Most early toolmakers just hit one rock with another until it looked sharp. Neanderthals did something fundamentally more complex. They would carefully prepare a stone core, shaping it so that a single strike would flake off a perfectly sized, razor-sharp blade. You must see the blade hidden inside the raw rock before the first swing. It is physics performed in the mind's eye. These engineered tools weren't designed for small game. They were built to dismantle the largest land mammals to ever walk the earth. Meet Paleoloxodon antiquus, the straight-tusked elephant. Imagine a creature twice the size of a modern African elephant, standing 13 feet tall. A single one of these giants carried enough meat to feed a community of 100 individuals for an entire month. Bringing one down required a systematic, coordinated assault. Recent research confirms that Neanderthals didn't just scavenge these beasts, they hunted them. This wasn't a frantic struggle, it was a calculated harvest. Sites show evidence of repeated, successful hunts over generations. To kill a 10-ton animal, you need deep understanding of anatomy, terrain, and the behavioral psychology of your prey. You have to coordinate dozens of hunters, ensuring everyone knows their role in the lethal dance. This suggests a linguistic template for complex tactical plans. You can't hunt an elephant of that scale with simple grunts. Every strike was a data point. Every tool was a calibrated instrument. They operated with a level of precision that defies the caveman myth. Their success wasn't based on raw strength alone. It was the result of a cognitive loop: observe, engineer, execute, and refine. This blueprint of survival allowed them to dominate Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. They were masters of their environment. Yet, even with this mastery, their world was shifting. The climate was entering a period of instability with sudden temperature swings. These Dansgaard-Oeschger events fragmented the vast forests they relied on. The stability their technology was built for was disappearing. Their small, tight-knit groups became isolated islands in a changing sea of grasslands. Mobility became the new survival currency. As landscapes shifted, a new type of human filtered into these territories. They carried different tools and moved in larger groups. The stage was set for a collision. One group was built for specialized mastery, and one was built for rapid expansion. The Neanderthals weren't being outthought. Their logical architecture was simply optimized for a world that was rapidly being rewritten. As populations overlapped, interaction wasn't just competition, it was integration. The high-tech spear makers and the wandering sapiens began to share more than just the landscape. They shared a singular biological future. The intricate tools and chemical mastery we explored earlier weren't just relics left in the frozen dirt of the deep past, but the most sophisticated technology the Neanderthals ever developed wasn't made of stone, it was their own genetic code. We have traditionally viewed extinction as a violent erasure. We imagined a world where one species simply deleted the other from existence. However, the genomic data emerging from the Max Planck Institute suggests a conclusion that is far more intimate than a battlefield. When Homo sapiens first pushed into the Levant 60,000 years ago, they encountered a population already calibrated for the Eurasian climate. These weren't just rivals, they were a biological template that had already solved the problems of the North over 400,000 years. Today, if your ancestry lies outside of Africa, your very cells carry the physical proof of what happened in those caves. You are walking around with between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA integrated directly into your unique human genome. On the surface, a few percentage points seem like a rounding error, but when we look at the global population, everything shifts. Distributed across billions of living humans, roughly 20 to 40% of the entire Neanderthal genome still exists today. They didn't disappear, they were simply scattered into us. This isn't a dead legacy. It is an active, functioning program. We inherited specific genes known as toll-like receptors. These are the frontline sentries of your immune system. These receptors are designed to detect fungi, bacteria, and parasites in your blood before they can take hold. For a wandering tribe of sapiens, this was an evolutionary cheat code. They didn't have to wait millennia to evolve defenses. They simply absorbed the immunity that Neanderthals had already perfected. This genetic technology transfer likely saved our entire species, but running Ice Age software on 21st century hardware creates friction. The traits that ensured their survival are now our modern liabilities. The hyper-efficient blood clotting mechanism that once saved a hunter from a wound now increases our risk of strokes today. Even our psychological landscape is haunted. Geneticists have linked Neanderthal variants to higher risks of nicotine addiction and clinical depression. It is a lingering echo of a brain architecture designed for small, tight-knit groups, now struggling with anonymous megacities. The recent pandemic even highlighted this hidden hand. A specific gene cluster on chromosome 3 drastically increased respiratory failure risk, yet, in a strange twist of biological irony, another inherited segment actually provided a layer of protection against that same virus. Our survival is still being negotiated by genetic decisions made 50,000 years ago. The replacement model of extinction is officially dead. The absorption theory suggests there were never more than 70,000 Neanderthals alive. They were a small drop in an incoming ocean. When larger populations of sapiens arrived, the Neanderthal gene pool wasn't destroyed by spears, it was diluted into the whole. In East Asia, this merger was even more profound. Residents there carried 20% more Neanderthal ancestry due to a second interbreeding. We also carry the ghost lineages of the Denisovans. Our history is not a clean line, but a tangled web of DNA. Imagine a reality where they had never merged. We would likely see species-specific medicine, where drugs for one are lethal to another. Psychology would recognize Neanderthal-type cognition, perhaps defined by superior spatial memory and distinct social grooming rituals we can only imagine. But that diversity wasn't lost. It was internalized. You are a biological mosaic, a walking archive of every struggle ever endured. The Neanderthals never truly left. They just stepped into the shadows of our genetic code, waiting for the environment to change. If this journey into the deep logic of our past shifted your perspective, subscribe to the Wild Mind Facts channel. Stay curious, because when you look in the mirror tonight, you aren't just looking at yourself, you're seeing a survivor.